Today, we have a great guest for Unmuted. And if you are watching Pro Life Issues, you are really going to enjoy this conversation with Kristen Hawkins. She is the president of Students for Life, and she's also a wife, a mother. She is busy speaking to college kids and writing for college kids, educating them on the issue of life and standing strong for human rights. So, Kristen, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Senator.
Absolutely. We're delighted to have you join us. Now, we have a couple of pro-life issues that have kind of been front and center. So everyone has heard about the Mississippi case, the Dobbs case. So why don't you talk a little bit about why this is so important to the pro-life movement?
Absolutely. The case that just came before the court on December 1st, where they've heard oral arguments, is a law that was passed and signed in Mississippi that bans abortions when children can feel pain at 15 weeks and when the abortions are actually conducted by dismembering the child because they are too large to be vacuumed through a suction cannula. And so this is it's an important law, and it's one that the pro-life movement believes states should have the right to be able to pass to protect the most vulnerable citizens. Obviously, the abortion industry immediately sued when this law was signed and did everything in their power to stop this law from going into effect, which has led us to the Supreme Court. The oral arguments went very, very well. For the pro-life movement, the pro-abortion movement, the abortion industry, and then the U.S. government Solicitor General's argument before the court as to why this law should be struck down and not upheld was essentially no backsies. That Roe v. Wade has been law of the land for nearly 50 years. Nearly 62 million children have been killed in that time, and we just can't go back. And so they really didn't have much of an argument. So it went very, very well for the movement and for these children that we're aiming to protect. Decision will come down at the very end of June, at the end of the Supreme Court's session this year.
And you mentioned something there that I think you should expand on, that states' rights. So why don't you touch on that and the importance of that in the Dobbs case?
That's essentially the argument that is made, is that in what Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton, its companion case, which were handed down on the same day, January 22nd, 1973, which this is exactly what they did. They dismantled all states' rights when it comes to deciding for themselves what the limits of abortion should be in their state. When the Supreme Court handed down Roe and Doe, they said, it doesn't matter what your state government, what your elected officials have decided. We, 7 men on the Supreme Court, are going to decide for you that abortion should be allowed in all 9 months for whatever reason, and sometimes with taxpayer funds. And so this was a very interesting case. You know, in the oral arguments I was listening to, one of the justices, questioned, well, abortion's not even in the Constitution. So shouldn't the court at least be neutral on this issue, allowing states to decide for themselves whether or not they're going to protect these vulnerable preborn children? And that's really the argument that we're making in the pro-life movement, is reverse Roe versus Wade, send the decision back to our states where we can elect officials, where we see at church and we can meet them at the grocery store, who will then go to the state capitals and vote to decide how to protect these children.
Yes, and I think that's such an important part of the argument, that Roe v. Wade and, as you said, Roe and Doe, what happened was states' ability to take an action in this vein was removed at that point in time. Also, when you look a little bit further out, you see that the U.S. is in some fairly unsavory company when it comes to countries that allow abortion after 20 weeks. And we're one of only 7 countries that has a permissive statute that allows this action to take place later in an abortion. I know North Korea and China have very permissive laws, but touch on that.
Yeah, sometimes we hear the argument, actually, I hear it a lot, I was debating, well, I think what called in to be an abortionist on the NPR not long ago, who was arguing with me that no late-term abortions exist in this country. That is simply not true. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control, even though we don't have a national abortion reporting law, so we never really know how many abortions actually occur, and states don't actually have to turn in their abortion numbers to the CDC, states like California. But we know just with the CDC numbers, every year there's a little over 11,000 preborn children that are killed late in pregnancy, second and third trimester and pregnancy. So these abortions do happen in our country. You're absolutely right. We are one of 7 nations, only 7 nations in the world that allows a woman to go in 36 weeks pregnant and ask for abortion. I was at the Supreme Court the day of the oral argument. NBC reporter called me a liar on air and said that this doesn't happen. And I started spouting off all of the late-term abortionists I know, people I've met, abortion facilities I've prayed in front of that do actually do these abortions. Leroy Carhart, who operates a facility not far from where you are at the Capitol today, has openly spoken. He's gone to medical schools to openly speak about how he, performs late-term abortions into the 9th month of pregnancy. And many of those abortions are because of fetal abnormalities, something that's been diagnosed in the womb, but they don't have to be. They don't have to be. There's no law saying you can't do that. Now, some states, thankfully, have passed laws banning abortions at 24 weeks. And the Supreme Court has said that they will allow, after viability bans to be upheld. But some states like California, New Mexico, Colorado, Maryland, Illinois, they allow abortions up until the moment of birth for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. I find it so interesting talking to women, young and older, that will say science has changed their mind. They were once pro-choice or believed that abortion should be allowed, but after they started looking at their baby's sonogram or their grandchild's sonogram, it really changed their mind. So science really supports a pro-life position, correct?
It absolutely does. We just released a video at Students for Life with a nursing student at a college campus demanding us to believe that as a sperm dying is a death of a child. And it's unbelievable how anti-science those who advocate abortion are. The fact that it takes 2 parts, a sperm and an egg from mother and father to combine to create unique whole living human being, a unique DNA code that's never existed before, will never exist again. We are absolutely pro-science in the pro-life movement. It is those who advocate for abortion routinely have to deny what science teaches us, what 96% of all biologists agree on, that human life begins at the moment of conception. In fact, I feel, and this is kind of when I have arguments and debates with students on campuses, I often try to tell them, stop trying to deny the science, at least acknowledge the science, and then tell me you disagree philosophically, that you don't believe that human being has value, has rights. That is actually what the abortion argument is in America, that these children, these members of our species, do not have the same rights to live as their mother. That is the actual argument. But instead, you often hear these crazy off-the-wall things. We heard them at the Dobbs, outside of the Dobbs hearing the other week at the Supreme Court, these crazy off-the-wall things that are just anti-science and actually makes their side look very bad.
Well, I think you're right about that. And we are so appreciative that you are out there having these debates on college campuses and are continuing to push forward with Students for Life. And our unmuted audience can learn more about you and your work on social media at Kristen, Kristan Hawkins, at Kristen Hawkins. You can find her on social media. And of course, you're always going to find me on social media at Marsha Blackburn. Thank you so much for joining us today.